Good morning, Mr. Netanyahu.
Good morning.
We're here to talk about the Gaza conflict, and I'm wondering if you think it's enough to cripple Hamas to a point where they'll want to renew a ceasefire, or do you think that the goal of the operation should be something else?
I think at the end of the day we have no option but to remove the Hamas regime from Gaza. It's committed to our destruction. It openly says it's committed to our destruction. It arms itself and fires indiscriminately at our cities. It's allied with Iran that calls for our destruction. So these people are against peace, against coexistence. They'll just continue arming themselves again and again and again, which is essentially what has happened since they took over.
The oil market is toppling on fears that this is going to spread. How much of a possibility do you think that is?
Well, I hope it can be contained to the extent that the international community supports Israel in this just battle against these terrorists. Then to that extent it would be contained and finished. What are the terrorists hoping? What is Hamas and its Iranian backers? What do they hope? They hope to dupe the world. They want to launch attacks on civilians as they hide behind civilians. That's a double war crime in itself. And when Israel responds by trying to target the terrorists themselves, as some incidental casualties, civilian casualties are incurred, they want to say, you see, here's a symmetry. It's a plague on both your houses. Israel stop, Hamas stop. The minute we stop, the international community is sending a message to Hamas, the terrorists, Iran, their backers. You can go on and do this again and again and again. So you're not going to contain this. It's just going to spread. You're going to legitimize the use of the targeting of terrorists and the use of the targeting of civilians and the use of civilians as human shields. So I think if you want to contain this and end it, the international community has to back Israel in its effort against the terrorists who fire deliberately at civilians and hide behind civilians. If we do that, if there's international backing to it, I think this will be contained. I think Hamas can be defeated in short order.
Do you think that we need a ground invasion in order to do that?
I don't want to discuss tactics. I think what is important is the goal, and the goal is ultimately to defeat this terrorist regime and allow the other forces amidst the Palestinians to come forth. And there are other forces. Understand not only in the West Bank, where I think we moving towards peace, including an economic peace, is absolutely possible. I think it's also true of Gaza, where the Palestinian population is being held hostage by Hamas. What are they doing? They're planting these terrorist rocket launchers right at the in people's homes, in schools. Their R&D lab to produce these explosives is in the university there. In other words, they're forcing themselves on the civilian population, and they're basically holding the people of Gaza hostage. So they're holding now close to 1 million Israelis hostage with terrorist rocket fire, and they're holding the people of Gaza hostage by embedding themselves deep in the civilian population. And so there are other people amidst the Palestinians, many other people who yearn, some secretly and some openly, that this Hamas terrorist regime, this foreign Iranian implantation, is done away with, and that'll be good for peace.
Israel's at the height of an election campaign, and I know all the parties have said we're to put it aside. But I'm just wondering if the campaign is a success. Do you think that'll affect the Likud and the outcome of the poll?
I don't know. I think the right thing to do is the right thing to do, and that is when you're in the middle of such a battle against terrorists, you put politics aside and you say, we support the government. In fact, the Prime Minister asked me yesterday to do this interview and many other interviews. He said, look, we have to unite all the forces. And I said, you're absolutely right. There's no opposition. There's no coalition. We're a united people. In the face of this criminal attack on our cities, on our population, and you know what? I think we should be united. The whole civilized world should be united in supporting Israel in this, because if it doesn't support Israel, then they're going to be next, because we're sending a message to the terrorists. You can do this again. You can do this to other countries, to other democracies. You target their cities. You fire thousands of rockets into a city. Can you imagine, to London or Paris or New York? And then when the government finally decides after 6,000 rockets to respond, then you say, oh, no, you can't, because some civilians will be hurt, as they tragically are on the other side. And, of course, nobody can accept that. You try to minimize civilian casualties, but at the end of the day, you do not give immunity to terrorists who fire on civilians and who hide behind civilians.
An economic question now. If this stretches out to like 34 days, like the second Lebanon war, will it have an effect on the economy? And are there any steps the government can take to mitigate such economic damage?
I think so. I think we've shown in the second Lebanon war, which lasted a considerable time, that the Israeli economy just went right through. We built a very powerful economic engine in the years preceding the second Lebanon war. We liberalized the economy, dropped taxes, just opened the economy for competition. It was so robust that Israel achieved, still has, one of the highest growth rates of the developed countries. So I think Israel's economy is powerful. If I get into office, I'll make it even more powerful, continue the reforms that I began with. I don't think the economy will be hurt. We have the challenge to deal with the world slowdown, and it's just these small economies that are like nimble mammals that can climb the mountain quickly and not be washed away by the waves of the tsunami. We've effectively done part of that. I think we can climb a lot higher, and in fact, use the crisis to effect many more reforms that will put Israel in a much more competitive situation in the world economy. So if I have anything to do with it, Israel's economy will be even more robust than it is today.
And the last question, you've been talking about how important economy is for the peace process. Can you elaborate on that? How would that work?
I think this could work very quickly and very effectively with the Palestinians in the West Bank. There we know there's a government that wants to deal with us. We have some problems that are very difficult, like the refugees in Israel in Jerusalem. And you know, if you try to solve them right away, it's like trying to build the pyramid from its apex. So, and we usually fail. So I like to build the pyramid with layers from the bottom and start having both interim political agreements laced with rapid economic development. The whole of the West Bank is about 1.5 million people, give or take, a few 100,000. It's like a city. And it's very easy to develop economic projects, rapid economic growth. And I've spoken to Tony Blair, the Quartet international representative on this. I've spoken about this with President-elect Obama and the President of France, Sarkozy. My view is that if I'm elected, what I want to do is take personal charge of removing bureaucratic barriers, working with the Palestinian Authority counterparts to advance rapid economic development for the Palestinians in the West Bank. That is not a substitute for political negotiations. It's a facilitator for the success of the political negotiations. And we've seen in other parts of the world, in Ireland, Northern Ireland, in Cyprus, and elsewhere, where rapid economic development didn't solve political problems, but it made their solution more possible. And that's what I hope to achieve with the Palestinian Authority and with anyone who is willing to drop the idea of eradicating Israel and adopt the idea of peaceful coexistence and economic coexistence.
But there is the issue of security and the roadblocks and the checkpoints, and you in the past have been very vocal about not opening them and keeping them in place. Now, about I'm just wondering how
well,
you
I was very forthcoming as Prime Minister. During my period, the Palestinian economy grew. It's the only period since the Oslo Accords, talking now about 15 years. It's the only time in which the Palestinian economy and the GDP per capita grew for the Palestinians when I was Prime Minister. Why? Because, in fact, I had a very liberal policy vis-a-vis the economy. As long as security was maintained, I was very much in favor of the free flow of goods and people. And I think this is something we have to go back to. I think it's right. There are a lot of bureaucratic things that we can unblock, and I intend to personally do on the Israeli side. Of course, there are security concerns, but there are ways of thinking about this to separate the needs of Palestinian economic growth from the needs of Israeli security. And the way to get around this problem is to develop the economy in the seam line between Israel and the Palestinian areas so that we can enjoy economic forces that are feeding both Israel and the Palestinians in a way that doesn't impair security. I have 4 or 5 projects that I'd love to begin to take up with my Palestinian counterparts, but for that I first have to get elected.